chat with musicians for their perspective on the other side of the stage.
Welcome to the Howling with Marty Wolf. I'm your host, Marty Wolf, and this week we're chatting with multi-instrumentalist, band leader, and a master's in saxophone, Gord Hyland. A little bit of everything from sci-fi to Junos. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Marty.
Appreciate it. Starting off, let's take it back a bit. I know you grew up very into computers, cars, sci-fi. When did saxophone come into focus, and when did that really become decision for the sort of the career path?
Okay, so I was always into, I attended a science camp with a couple of my cousins, and we had such a blast. It was at U of T. It was called Science Outreach. And at Science Outreach, you had to build a Goldberg machine, which is one of those machines that you put the marble in it, and it goes and like chitty chitty bang bang, and it hits another thing, and it causes something else to happen. It was like a whole physics thing. And from that day forward, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer specifically. And so did my cousin Eric. And so the two of us were just geared up to like make spaceships. That didn't happen because, you know, there's a lot that goes into making a hard science person. And I took my maths and sciences all the way up until like I had OAC. So until OAC, which is grade 13 in Ontario. But you know what? Calculus and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't very inspiring. And the side quest that was happening the whole time was the saxophone. So even though the most inspiring time for saxophone was junior high school, because, and this is how I got into the whole thing, was there's an announcement, came on announcements, auditions for stage band going to Japan. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to go to Japan.
Japan sounds pretty good, right?
Right? You know, I'm like, you know, East York is pretty cool where I grew up, but and so stage band going to Japan. I'm like, okay. So I auditioned. I got in. I actually, you know, beat out the older grades for some reason, and so I got first tenor saxophone, and it was like a little bit of a political thing. Like in hindsight, looking back, I realized that a bit of a coup.
A little
bit of a coup. Like so there's people looking at me being like, "How'd you get the first chair?" And then it started a challenge and all sorts of stuff. Anyway. So that's how I got into saxophone, but the sci-fi thing has always been obviously something that's really inspired. Like I love science and I love all of that stuff. And I honestly, if I was, you know, more mathematically inclined, like I'm pretty mathematically inclined, but like, so the science remains, you know, it's, and I mean, I guess I approach the saxophone kind of scientifically. I'm a little bit of a nerd about it.
A bit of a mad scientist, I'd say. With the saxophone, what were some of the early loves, like early, you know, with any songs, anybody playing, anywhere you heard it very early on that really kind of was pulling you in like a lot?
Yeah, Stan Getz was my favorite, like 100%. Like Joe Beeman Getz, I have every one of the records of Stan Getz with somebody else. So Oscar Peterson, Lionel Hampton, and all that kind of stuff. So that was an early love. But, you know, when I got into that stage band in grade 8, I would go to Japan in grade 9. But when I got into the stage band in grade 8, I went through my grandfather's records, my Opa's records. And he of course, had Tommy Dorsey, like Glenn Miller, all of those things in this collection, which I actually have behind me still. And I used to put that stuff on. It was like, it was good. It was good swinging stuff, you know. I guess for a science nerd, having a big band thing going on in the background, you know, that was inspiring to me. So I enjoyed that music, and I enjoyed the challenge. You know, that when I got the way that my mom puts it is that, you know, you just started practicing the saxophone. You didn't sound very good, but you kept doing it. So I think it was like a good puzzle for me at the time, just to be like, I don't know, I want to do better at this. And then because I had got this position in the stage band, and people were like, are you really good enough from the older grades? Then I was like, I used to go in the morning early, like every day to practice for the sort of big solo moments or whatever I would have to do.
Starting from there to, again, going into, you know, post-secondary, you're a master's now in saxophone. What was the decision like to leave a pretty music-heavy city like Toronto for the education, like going off to Montreal and Concordia?
That was all about just getting out of the city and reading, because even though music was there, and I was doing the extracurricular stuff and in music class and stuff like that. It's not like it was a rigorous program that's designed to get you into like the top programs. Like I couldn't just go from high school. I wasn't good enough to just go into U of T's jazz program, or I mean Humber would have been an option. And actually, when I auditioned in Montreal, which I would later go to school in Montreal, this guy, one of the mean audition panel guys, was like, "Why didn't you just go to Humber if you're from Toronto?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't. Honestly, I didn't know it existed. Like, you know." It's not like I was going through an art school program. Like, you know, like I didn't even know that there was a thing called an art school when I was going to high school. And they existed, and people were in these channels and doing these things. And there's even like a lot of my peers that I run into later in Toronto went to the Humber Saturday School for Jazz, which basically had all the university professors coaching them on how to do that. So long story short, I wanted to get out of town because I was kind of like, I really want to do this. I'm going to take a year off. In that year off, I applied so I had applied to York and got into that school, and I was totally happy to go there. But then I applied in Montreal to McGill and Concordia. I got into Concordia. And so I really wanted to go to just like redefine who I was and just be like, I'm going to be a musician now, and I'm going to, you know, sort of reinvent my life as a musician.
And I mean, when you came back to the city too, clearly came back with a very different perspective. Because remember, one of the first projects worked on when you came back from the city was going to be the Ninja Funk Orchestra, which was, you know, rock, EDM elements, guerrilla marketing. It was really it's kind of its own unique beast. You take me through sort of the eras that you had within sort of the development of that first big project for yourself, the Ninja Funk Orchestra.
So out of like the sequences out of university in Montreal, I got onto a tour with the Kingpins, a ska band from Montreal that was quite well known, and this was totally right. You know, some guy in the practice room was like, "Hey, Gord, I think you got some stuff. Like come and audition for this thing." So anyways, I auditioned for the thing, and I went on my first big tour, and I went for 31 days across North America, from Montreal to Rock Island, Illinois, down Route 66 all the way to Hollywood, and, you know, up the coast, and then across, you know, to Vancouver, and then across Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, Calgary, all of these things. And I loved it. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to Toronto, and I want to do it there. And it was really nice to reconnect with my family and friends after being away for 4 years. And I had this idea. I'm like, well, I just saw the ska band go on tour. I think I can do that with my friends. Like, wouldn't this be amazing if I just did this with my pals? So I called out my high school pals, rented a big house, like a 5-bedroom place. And I was like, okay, we're going to make music in this place and do it. Of course, that dream didn't work out. But so here are the phases. So I come back to Toronto. I try to do something like that. It's not working out. I get connected with a saxophone teacher because I'm like, I still have a lot to learn, you know, like with jazz and the saxophone, there's always just so much work that you can do and trying to get closer to it. So I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to get entrenched in the scene, and I meet Alex Dean, who's a professor in many of the places, and he becomes a mentor, and he's like, hey, Gord, you should go and play in this big band in the Chicken Deli. There's a lot of people, you know, it's kind of just like an amateur big band filled with music teachers and some students and some lawyers. You know, it's called the Advocates. And so the Advocates would actually lead to many, many opportunities. But the one thing that got me is I met young Mac Longpre in that band, and Mac Longpre was 18 at the time. He was a very talented
prodigal son at the time, I guess, right?
I know,
18-year-old Mac Longpre, right?
I know, and I think I was 24 maybe. So I was like, this guy is amazing, and I started talking to him. It's very hard to find a network in a new city. I had just lost my entire music network by leaving Montreal. It would be more efficient if I would go to school, because I'd have somewhere to practice, I'd meet new people, and I could re-up my skills. I don't think my job is done here in learning. So I traded in my Concordia degree for like 2 years at U of T's program, their bachelor's program, which is a really, you know, really kind of small, cool program. And I totally went and did that. And so Ninja Funk comes out of Mac and I continuing to collaborate, him inspiring me to like be like, you know what? I don't care if I'm older. I think that I need to retrain, and these guys are great. So I wind up getting to that program. I meet Neil Whitford. But before I go into the program, I start the Concord Funk Jam, and this is because Montreal has a lot of jam sessions that were unrelated. I really to just specifically jazz. There's DJs, there's hip hop people, there's all sorts of things. I played with like DJs a lot. And I wanted to bring some of that vibe here because I was like, I can't find it here. And so I started this jam session before, and Mac, Neil, and my buddy Adam Jenkins were the band. And okay, so it was just set up to be a jam session at first, but that's what turned into Ninja Funk Orchestra. I go to school, I get into the program. Adam Jenkins leaves, and some other bass players come through, and eventually we meet Andrew Rorda, because the jam is doing well, and doing well in that people are coming, and I remember a great moment being like when the Cirque du Soleil horn players came out to like, oh, we heard this jam was cool. It's like, this is amazing. They were fantastic. Right? World. It's like okay, cool. This is cool. And so we took that gig, and one day, and we tried to get more gigs. So we got a gig at the Four Seasons as the hotel lobby band.
Classic lobby band gig.
Yeah, and so we banked that money for a recording, and then we did a recording, and that became Ninja Funk Orchestra. And the reason it was called Ninja Funk Orchestra is we kind of did like a survey off the stage of the people that are there, is like, what names do you like? And it's like Ninja Funk Orchestra. So I had to live with that name, and it's a fantastic name, but it's also very lengthy and hilarious. Anyway, that's how Ninja Funk came to be, and the reason it was so electronic inspired. And I had heard Joshua Redman's album Elastic, and I had seen him live, and him. And actually, even more importantly, a record called Heavy Metal Bebop by the Brecker Brothers was something I was introduced to really early on. And that features the trumpet and saxophone, Randy Brecker on trumpet and Michael Brecker on saxophone. And Michael Brecker is like one of the best, greatest, most recorded of all time. But this project, he was like 18 or 19, and he was using effects pedals. So he was using a Mutron for an auto-wah and these different things. And I was just like, what is this thing? So as much as I was studying jazz to, figure out how to play and improvise in that kind of way, I was always interested in that, the effects pedal stuff, and it was it was a little bit different than other people. Like, they weren't so into it or thought it was cheesy and whatever. I'm like, playing with a rock band, like as a saxophone, you can either growl, like just be like really growly. If you go back to the 50s and stuff like that, like, the first fuzz pedals are to model like saxophone growl basically on guitar. As soon as the electric guitar comes along, then, because I did this whole project in my master's on why the saxophone actually became electrified and why saxophone companies and trumpet companies and everything, they started putting pickups into their instruments to compete with the electric guitar because it was such a fantastic selling instrument. It totally blew everybody away. So the horn player, all the horn, Selmer, Kahn, all these companies were electrifying their instruments for hopes of greater sales. Anyway, I'm going on and on here, but like,
well, just on that really quickly there, just a little sidebar there, because I know you're master's in saxophone now from U of T, and you've taught classes and you've taught workshops and stuff on using the effects pedals. What is sort of the modern relationship, I guess, with jazz, and aged 2026 now? What's the sort of the dynamic like with the using sort of modern, using all the nice Moogs and stuff, because there's all this stuff built for brass and woodwind now that's designed to be used with these items. What's sort of the relationship there now?
I would say now it is much more accepted, and a lot of people are doing it. And it's partly because like the effects cost so much money. Like another band and another person, like there's the Bloom Daddies are a group from Brooklyn, New York, and Seamus Blake, total like quote unquote young lion saxophone player, and Chris Cheek. It was two drummers, two saxophones with effects plus bass, or something like that. And it was just wild. I remember walking into a show at the Rex and seeing them, and I had to leave. It was so amazing and intense. And anyway, yeah, they were amazing, and I would eventually like study with Chris Cheek and Seamus Blake and go and ask. And I went down to New York. And I'm like, what do you do? What do you do? And to check out these rigs, but they were rack-mounted effects things. So, they would use a vocal effects, like a Digitech vocal effects processor, and Joshua Redman used the Eventide Eclipse, which is like a $5,000 rack-mounted thing. And now, Eventide makes something when they made the H9, which is a guitar effects algorithm bass pedal that allowed you to spend like $500 and get the whole thing that a rack unit could do. So like there's something about the miniaturization of this technology and being able to make it more cost effective that has actually opened up the options for a lot of people too. And actually, my new rig that I'm building right now uses AxeFX modeling. So
they're doing sax stuff now too, eh? The AxeFX guys. 'Cause I remember they were killing it in guitar for a while, and I guess
they're totally not doing saxophone, but I'm figuring out how to use it for saxophone.
Oh, okay.
So and if I get really nerdy about it, the thing about, so I have an FM. I don't even want to give away this information. It's too good, but they make smaller, like there's the rack mounted AxeFX thing, which is like metal band, like all sorts of bands just use that as their whole show, and they have smaller units. They have this FM3. Well, what's good for saxophone is you can control the gain staging at every point and also the EQs of everything at every point. Ooh. Because the saxophone is quite volatile as it's, when you mic it with a drum kit behind it, so the challenge is always, playing with a loud band like Ninja Funk Orchestra. As soon as that cymbal hits, it's going to trigger the mic to do something, and the effect is going to do something different, as opposed to the electric guitar where the signal is closed and it's going through a cable and it can just like directly trigger the effect. I'm always dealing with the acoustic problem. Anyway, so
I did want to ask you though, going from something like Ninja Funk, which had this incredible live show, quite a stage show. There was a visual screen, you guys had incredible stage outfits, the leather pants, the all black and everything, the sunglasses. How was it going from something like that to maybe doing some of the guest spots that you've done in terms of stage show, being on stage with Down with Webster, for example, when you were gigging with a, sort of a Much Music band like that?
Yeah, totally. In a balaclava, totally hidden from view. Ninja Funk Orchestra was and is the most important sort of art project, because it definitely went beyond that and beyond just the music. And so I was working with Beth Cates, who was at the time and is now. It's someone who can do stage design, costume design, lighting design. It's a very special kind of role where she is capable of like all of those things. So she turns into huge inspiration. She's like, well, we can do all these things. And so we set about spending many days, nights, and rehearsals just like designing all of this stuff to make it crazy. And so our first show at the Mod Club, we landed this Mod Club gig, and guerrilla marketing and selling tickets and doing the whole thing, and it was great, and it was a good turnout, and it was awesome. But yeah, like my interest in the complete show is based on not a theory, but like instrumental, like electronic music is one of the most popular music forms in the world, and it's largely instrumental. Jazz you train to play instrumental solos and write chords and find cool things and do all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was a perfect merger to be like, well, the opportunity is here. We can, instead of having like just a silly little melody, it can be like a more interesting melody or a more complicated thing, or like instead of just having like sort of the DJ fake his way through a sax solo, which sounds to me like garbage, but serves the purpose. I'm like, well, what if it was a really good sax solo there, And so it's just like, there's an opportunity here. And also because instrumental music, there's no visual component to it. And, I felt that jazz in its form, not all of it, but like in the contemporary form, was very focused on like, look at me and what I can do. And I was very into like, let's take the pressure off of like both us as performers and off the audience to be appreciative of like, oh, well, you took a solo hand clap, 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 clap. Which there's a time and place for, and in some ways I wasn't interested in that. So having a band and creating a visual show for people to like go on a trip together and just go on a journey, I thought like was like giving the audience something at the same time as like, really being interested. I guess what gets my heart racing are like great grooves and sick bass lines. It comes down to it. What I'm dancing around to at home is just like it can be dumb and simple and awesome. And like I just want to play sax on that. That stuff continues with Disaster Pony right now in not to jump it, but like in designing new kind of ways and interactions. Like I'm very mindful also of like the use of interactive technologies in like the music space. It's like I don't want it to be a gimmick. I want it to be like, oh, you go to a football game and they give you like a wristband that glows for the halftime show, like versus like Nicole Lizzie did an opera, like an experimental opera. And it was amazing, like, the interactivity of their outfits and stuff like that. But like the truth is like, I don't know where that fits into like an actual real show. I don't want that. But I do think the visual thing and like being able to contextualize things, and also really being important to me is like every show that I produce is a collaboration between a bunch of people where people have equal says in what's going on. And like I just want to encourage people to be themselves, because I feel like a lot of us freelancers are working for other people. And so what I try to do is give someone an opportunity to be like, what do you like, and then riff with them, and then find something where our values and what we're interested in overlap, and then that becomes the show.
So, I mean, with Disaster Pony, you brought up it's the current project. So we had one album, Juno nominated, by the way. You'll have to tell us a little bit about the Juno nomination, what that was like going out there to BC and everything. But also, with the name Disaster Pony, what was the sort of, what did we take from the last project and bring it into this current current iteration? And what was sort of the ethos behind the Disaster Pony?
Yeah, so the ethos behind Disaster Pony and was basically this is a project that kind of was born in a different way, where members of Dwayne Gretzky that I'm on tour with a lot, my buddy Adam Hindle, who's a drummer with them and other folks, he and I shared a room a lot, and we're just like, we need to make a danceable sax record. Like, we need to make a fun sax record, like something like Beastie Boys instrumental record meets just adds a saxophone. I think there's only 2 tracks, Beastie Boy tracks, maybe only one that has a saxophone on it. So that was the mission. But what happened is that Dwayne Gretzky gets this rehearsal space, and they members of the band build it out and put like a basic board in, and Ian Doherty, the other producer from the project, so it's Adam, Ian, and I, he starts to do recording experiments during the pandemic, because we were locked down, and just before the pandemic too. So going in like late 2019, we get the space, they build it out, it becomes ready, and then basically we get locked down. So Ian, Adam, and I became close contacts. I even called the city to be like, are we allowed to be out? Because there's a moment where we thought we were going to get arrested on the street if we went out. We just didn't know what was going on. But there's a carve out for studios. So we looked into that, and I called the city. I'm like, is it okay if we go to this recording? And like, yes. So we spent a lot of time just doing recording experiments. At first, it wasn't Disaster Pony the project. It was just Adam and Ian would come up with something during the day, and then after, I was doing remote IT work with Macmedics at the time, because Dwayne Gretzky, the band that I played with and made, was the bulk of my work, was now not touring or playing at all. Yeah, so I did more remote work during the pandemic. Anyway, I decided after doing these experiments, I was like, well, why don't we make a record like this and do this danceable sax record? And so we set about doing that in February of 2021. Fast forward, like we do this session, we do these sessions, we eventually produce the record with lead to a Juno nomination, which was totally crazy. Yeah, what do I want to say about that? The ethos and why we made the record and what it was about. So it's about making approachable saxophone music, and just because like every track on that record made us laugh or smile. When we would,
it really does have like a jubilant energy to it. There's a very there's almost a Saturday morning kind of cartoon soundtracky feel to it. Even if the song isn't hitting that tone, there's this very fun tone to the entire record.
Yeah, and so it's nice that something like a instrumental Juno nomination can come out of something actually being like, I just apply, the Junos, you just apply for them, right? So I'm like, my sort of checkbox thing, I'm just like, okay, well, I think I was backstage with Dwayne Gretzky, and I was like, they're like, what are you doing, Gord? Someone looked over my shoulder and was like, oh, applying for a Juno, eh?
What's that like being in... Okay, so with Dwayne Gretzky, what's that like playing with, a wide variety of some pretty renowned Ontario musicians, but also how do you guys pick your songs between like a stack of audio or a stack of musicians like that?
I think it's a series of really intelligent dolphins in different tanks that sort of like reach for, cue balls that then filter down.
Yes, I've got you.
Yeah. The choosing the repertoire, like the people get to comment on it, but like Tyler Kite is the one who puts the final touches on it. So
there's the leads. It's not like all 12 of you guys or anything, or however many, how many on a given night, I think we should throw this in tonight. None of that.
No, I'm just always advocating for saxophone, things that have saxophone, period. And the different vocalists are saying like, hey, I'd like to do this song. Hey, I'd like to do this song, et cetera, et cetera. And then ultimately it has to fit into a cohesive set, and that's Tyler's job to do that with the help of Nick Rose, who is the other sort of main band guy.
Have you ever had to make up while playing with Dwayne, because you guys do all these wicked cover sets, have you ever had to make up just kind of on the fly, be like, oh, I guess I need to add a sax part here for a song,
like most, half of my role is like, so my job is to figure out what the saxophone is going to do anyways, like besides the obvious sax solos in different parts. And of course I play keyboards in that band too. Like whatever Simeon Abbott can't play with two hands on two different keyboards, then I play. So I'm the third keyboard. And, and then if I can find a way, so basically the process for that is is there a sax part? Yes or no? Is there a trumpet part or another horn part? Okay, so I'm taking the lead line of whatever hornish part there is. And then maybe I'm doubling a guitar hook. Maybe I'm taking a string line or some other synth melody and doubling that. It's actually kind of really... Now that I've done it for so long, it's like, okay, I just go through and try to find the things that seem like they could just come out a little bit more. Then I play those things. And then they've created space for me in different ways. Like, taking the live version of some tracks, you can find like that's when Paul Simon put a whole horn section on it, or Bruce Springsteen would have, he always had horns on his records, but that's where they might expand the arrangement and then sort of like being like, hey, let's take this from this. Like Adam Hindle is great at this. He's like he knows, he's such a music aficionado that he knows like every recording, and like he's like, there's a live version where the saxophone does this thing or this horn section does a thing. So I pick up on those things and try to play them.
Perfect. Well, one more question. What do you got coming down the pipe for us over the next little bit? Can we expect more Disaster Pony soon?
Yeah, I'm in the studio all last week and this week working on the second Disaster Pony record, and we'll be playing at North by Northeast this year, and there'll be some more touring dates coming up, but that's all yet to come. And Dwayne Gretzky is doing lots of stuff. You can look it up on their website. We're playing everywhere all the time. So
excellent. Well, we super appreciate you coming in, Gord. Thanks so much for your time, and see you next time on the Howler with Marty Wolf. Cheers so much. Thanks for coming in.
Marty.